Good evening and welcome. I am thrilled to see so many out here with us tonight. This is our last speakers until September, and we always are concerned that we're going to lose y'all during the summer, but we're confident that come September, you'll be back with us again. May is Historical Preservation Month, and the museum will be kicking off the Historical Preservation Month with the Martin County Historical Board. We'll have an open house all day on Monday, on Thursday, May 1st. And at 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock, they will have a kickoff event behind the museum. So we certainly hope you all turn out for that. There will be political speeches. Get over it. But we won't let them run too long. And there'll be refreshments provided after. So I hope you'll come out for that. The Preservation Board has got some 27, last I saw, events going on throughout the month of May. I'm not about to try and run them down for you, but rest assured, there's a list out which says where and when, everything from things over at the Elliott for the Preservationist of the Year, the log cabin in Jensen Beach, the old Stuart High School, the Captain Sewell's house. You know, there's something going on every day this coming month. So I hope I'll have that up on my website. I'm sure that the Preservation Board will as well. So look for that and take advantage of that information that's out there.
Book signing.
Book signing.
Like.
That's why I keep her around. She throws things at me. During that open house on the 1st, we're going to have Blake Flortenay here signing his book. Stuart, help me.
Revitalization of downtown Stuart in the 70s and 80s.
It's just recently been published. It is available over at the museum, and he's taken the time and effort to speak with some of the movers and shakers that were involved with the development, the redevelopment of downtown Stuart, and hope you'll enjoy that. I think that's it. Anything else, Coach?
No, I think we're ready for Indiantown.
Okay. If I could, I'd like to ask those who have said they would volunteer to come up and be a part of our panel to come on up, and I'm going to let Gloria do the introductions.
Okay, we're so happy tonight to have some real Indiantown people. Real ones? Real ones. Horace Wall is about as real as you can get. And we have Carroll McAllister. We have Gary Connolly. We have Sheldon Merritt and Lewis Connolly. And will you all please come up and have a seat? I'm going to ask several questions, and I probably won't even get to several, because once you start talking about Indiantown and people, I'm hoping that it'll jar the memory of the person next to you, and I won't have to ask any more questions. Now, let's start down there with Gary Connolly.
Johnny Layton, you told me this was just going to be true and false question.
Well, you taught me how to lie.
And I would be hooked up to a lie detector. Now, what was the question?
Where were you born?
I was born in Pahokee, Florida, but I lived in Martin County all my life. We lived in Port Mayaca till I was 12 years old, and then we moved to the big city, don't forget, of Indiantown. Y'all ignore my brother. He said I went to Okeechobee School for Boys.
That was later.
But yes, we moved to Indiantown when I was 12, and so I've been there ever since. And I love it.
Amen.
Some people, a lot of people over here, why do you live out there? I love the people. The people are wonderful, and I just love it.
No traffic.
Oh, no, there is now. Ooh.
Let's pass it to the next gentleman there. No, no.
Well, you said gentlemen.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name's Lewis, and I'm Gary's brother. I was born in Pahokee too. Lived in Port Mayaca for how long? 12 years, 13 years?
Till I was 12.
Anyway, ninth grade, we moved to Indiantown, so.
Put the mic to your, can't hear you. There we go.
Anyway,
Perfect.
we grew up there back in the days when it was really a wonderful place to be. It probably still is. I moved out there in '96, went to Okeechobee for 4 years, and then now I live over here in Stuart on Canner Highway out here at Riverland. And I like Martin County, I always have. And people, once in a while you run into somebody that's been here forever. I graduated with Bruce back there, and I'm telling how many other people, I'm not sure, but that was a long time ago. Oh, I'm sorry, here.
Hi, I'm Sheldon Merritt, and real pleased to be here tonight. I'm kind of a newcomer, I guess. I was born, my dad used to always kid me, and he said that if anybody was born north of Lady Lake, Florida, they was a Yankee. And I was born in Leesburg, so I was just right on the borderline there. And I moved to Port Mayaca when I was 13. We made a big move south from Vero at that time. And in fact, it was kind of funny because I got to talking with Gary and Lewis, and they left, and then we moved to Port Mayaca and basically did the same thing. My dad kind of took over doing the same job that their dad was doing, and we actually lived in the same house that they lived in. And lived out there for a good number of years, and then as an adult, stayed pretty much in South Florida, and last 20 years or so I was over here in Stuart, and then when I retired, I went back to Indiantown, been out there another 6 years, and just happy as I can be.
I'm Carroll McAllister. I was born in Stuart. I was born in the original hospital in Stuart that's over by Palm Beach Road. I believe it is a home today. Someone lives there. And I am one of the few people who has never moved away from Indiantown. My 3 siblings all left for a time in their lives, but eventually they saw the light and came home, back home to Indiantown. And I don't know of a better place in the world to live. Indiantown has been wonderful and good to me. I've known Iris. She's known me all my life. She knew me before I was born, probably.
All the rest of them too.
And Iris and I grew up on the same country road. And when I think of myself, I think of me as the proverbial country girl, because that's just what I am. That's all I've ever been. I've had a wonderful life. I just couldn't ask for it to be any better.
And I'm Iris Wall. Probably half of you know me in here. When I graduated from high school in Martin County, there was less than 40 kids in all of Martin County. Think about that now. Less than 40. I think there was about 38 of us. That little old bandstand that's right down there from the courthaus.
Oh, the band shell.
Yeah, the band shell. Every one of us fit in there, and all the officials of Martin County in 1948. And of course, I married Homer then. We graduated from high school. And I hate to tell you, but he was the handsomest guy in town. And I just adored him. 47 years we had together before he died of cancer, but I was thinking about these Connollys down here. When the night that their mother passed away, I had supper done, and we lived on the next street over. And I got this call, and he said, "Mr. Wall, could you come over here?" Said, "My mama's really sick." And Homer said, "Well, supper's on the table. I'll be over there in a few minutes." And he called back in a few minutes. He said, "Mr. Wall, could you come now?" He said, "Mother is really sick." And so me and Homer loaded up and went over there. And there I stood with all 5 of them boys when their mother passed away. And so we've had a bond for all these many years that it just can't be broken. The people of Indiantown, you know, you all feel sorry for us. Those you feel sorry for us. They say, "Oh, there's so many people in need in Indiantown." Honey, they drive up there in a brand new Cadillac. Get that free stuff, just take it, take it. And but I've lived there. 5 years we camped in the Everglades, but other than that, I've lived in Indiantown my whole life, and I'm 95 years old. I'll be 96 in November.
Okay, this question goes for those 2 men on the end. When you were young, little boys, did you ever get in any trouble? Well, I'll put it like this. What was the worst thing you ever did?
I never done nothing bad, so they had to.
I gotta think about it. I've been an angel.
I wasn't ready for nothing.
Yes,
Hey, Dad, you can only name one.
the worst thing I could remember when I was a kid, I was out on the front porch doing my homework, and my oldest brother comes out there and he lays both of his legs across my paperwork that I'm doing. I said, his name's James. I don't think he owes up that we're his family, but I said, "James, you need to move your feet. I'm trying to do my homework." I said, "James, you need to move your feet." I took my pencil and I stabbed him. And that broken piece of lead is still in his leg to this day. That's the worst thing I ever did. The rest of the time I had a halo.
Broken halo with that too.
Who was your best friend growing up in Indiantown?
Some of you know him. He's passed. Ricky Barfield.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Ricky passed. He was my best man at my wedding, and he lived. They lived in Canal Point.
Yeah.
And then he moved to Indiantown. His mother and him. Yeah.
Who were some of your school teachers? Do you remember any names?
Oh yes, Miss Harless, Miss Erdeke. Yeah, there's a list. Miss.
Ramonella.
No, I don't remember.
Don't tell me you had Don Ramonella. Don Ramonella?
Yeah.
English? I had him too.
Yeah.
He must be 300 years old.
Well, 298 to be exact.
I can't believe it.
Yeah.
But I didn't know there was going to be a
Mrs. Mouse.
remembering
Remember Mrs. Mouse?
part of that.
Yeah, he was a good friend of mine.
All right, pass it on, please, and let's ask Mr. Merritt.
Oh, good.
This one.
You missed
You're lucky you
one.
missed that one.
You
I
don't
had
look
a
like
bad
you
experience.
ever got in any trouble.
Well, there's some folks in here who know me pretty good, so I'm not going to try to lie. I got in a little bit of trouble. You want legal trouble or non-legal trouble?
You're on camera.
But let's go with the non-legal then. Probably the worst thing that I did when I lived in Port Mayaca was one day, and I don't know why, me and my cousin Ronnie Sherman, and some of you folks may know Ronnie Sherman, God God bless him, he's not with us, but we got the bright idea that we was gonna blow up my daddy's mailbox. And Ronnie had a whole bunch of these cherry bombs at the time, and so we packed it with stuff and put a cherry bomb in there and just blew it wide open. And that was probably the worst thing, and I was kind of had remembered that for many days afterwards after my dad got a hold of me. So.
Who was your best friend growing up?
Well, I hate to say that I moved to Port Mayaca when I was 13, and I went to school over in Stuart. So I was not I didn't associate with everybody in Indiantown like these folks here.
Okay.
But over in
You
Stuart.
can say my name if you want.
Well, one of my best friends over in Stuart was a man called Carl Williams, and a lot of you folks probably know Carl, and he's no longer with us as well. But then, I had friends in Indiantown, but not that I was real close with at that time.
Okay, let's ask Carol. Carol, who was your best friend?
Never done nothing bad.
Well, girls don't do bad things.
No, heck no, especially if their hair's
They're
red.
smarter,
So what was the question, Gloria?
Who was your best friend growing up?
Probably Iris's sister going to school, Katie, and I were, I think she was born in March and I was born in June. And of course, we were in school all the years together in Indiantown, and we always played together a lot. And as I said, we were close neighbors growing up. We lived on the same dirt road all of our life.
Cow hunted on horse. She rode a Shetland pony.
Oh,
I rode the wildest.
Iris can remember, of course, the cow hunting, and of course we had a Shetland pony that, and Shetlands are just stubborn as can
Oh, I
be,
know.
stubborn as a donkey.
Dogs.
And anyway, we'd be in the woods riding and tagging along, and Iris always laughs. My granddaddy, when the cattle were being gathered and herded, if we got to lagging behind, he'd say, "Now watch out for the babies, take care of the babies." And here we are, great big youngins. But he was always watching out for the babies because Queenie, we'd get in the highest palmettos there was, and she'd lay down with us. And then you couldn't get her up. My uncle would have to come and coax and pull on her to get her to stand up.
well, what did you do for fun?
Oh my
Everything we
goodness.
did was fun.
Everything you
We
did.
sure didn't have no money.
We roamed the woods. I am so sad for children today.
Oh, I know.
What a life I had. We roamed the woods and picked berries and just enjoyed nature. And Merle and I, we never had a good horse. We always had some old nag that my uncle would drag up there for us to ride, and we'd feed it and get it all better and try to ride it, and it'd buck us off, throw us off out there somewhere. Where the Martin power plant is today, my grandparents always had at least that for pasture land. And a few years ago, some guy, bigwig, I called him from Florida Power and Light, was talking about Indiantown, and I said, well, that big power plant you got out there is something, but I said, you completely tore my playground up. Because I played, and I can remember my grandfather was crippled, and there was just girls in our family. There was 5 of us. 2 of them was my mom's sister, and 3 of us, the sleigh girls. And Big Daddy would get us, and we'd have to go to the woods and help him mend the fence and just do whatever was to be done. But what special memories. And as I'm saying, I feel sorry for children today that they do not have that freedom that we had.
Now, when you were growing up, how often did you come into Stuart? Did you come to Stuart to go to the movies, or?
Oh my heavens, no, I was on the picture show. I remember we had a grocery store. It was Clyde Parsons' store, and probably I was 11 years old, and a man started coming on Saturday afternoon, And he would show a movie, all the old westerns up on the side of the building, and we sat out on the grass. And of course, you could go in the store and get any money.
Earl Knowles had that drugstore, didn't he?
And Earl Knowles had a drugstore, and we could maybe get an ice cream. That's where I had my first Eskimo pie.
Oh, my
Was at
God.
Earl Knowles. And and it really wasn't a drugstore. He sold aspirins and BCs and, Band-Aids, and it's not a real drugstore. We called it a drugstore. But it's a little soda fountain.
Oh,
And he
okay.
sold whatever you call aspirins and that type of stuff.
Right.
We had one telephone in Indiantown.
That's true.
Oh, my
And one
God.
time, Mr. Zarella got mad at somebody in Connecticut and jerked it out of the wall. And I tell you, we was through with Mr. Zarella for a little while, but we got over that.
Oh, my goodness.
But we just always
Had
played
fun.
and pretended and played house, played
That's right.
Cowboys and Indians, whatever it was we wanted to play. But we didn't have a lot of playtime. We always had chores to do.
Chores.
Yeah, we always.
Did any of your families farm anything?
Yeah, her daddy did.
Iris was the cowgirl, I was the farmer's daughter.
Okay.
Merlin.
One of them.
My sister's correcting me. One of the farmer's daughters.
Oh.
There was 3 girls, and then when Myrtle was 8 years old, we were surprised with a little brother. A lot of people know my brother, Bud Slade.
And we had a brother, and Claddy Savage had a brother.
Oh,
All at the same time.
It's like we had just had a bunch of girls, and then all at once, Claddy had that boy of his. We had Lamar, and they had
Bud Slade.
And I seen him last year at the rodeo, and I looked at him and I said, "Do I know you?" I said, "Good Lord, you look just like Bud Slade." He said, "That's who I am."
Does anyone from the audience have a question for any of these? Sandy,
I want Iris to tell us what a cracker is.
what a cracker is?
Yeah.
Okay, Iris is going to tell us what a cracker is. The real story now.
Well, one thing, I was at this meeting, and this boy said, "Miss Iris said, is there any difference between a cracker and a hippie?" I said, "Good Lord, yes." When I got home, I wrote this thing, "What is a cracker?" And it's good. If you want a copy of it, you call the lumberyard and they'll fix you one. But it's good. A cracker he'll do what he says. If he tells you he'll be there, you can bet on the fact that he'll be there. He does what he says he'll do. And then a cracker is a person that's, he not only does what, he helps people. I've never seen one in my life that you called and asked to help you that he didn't do it. They're just a people that'll help. That's their nature. And another thing is that you're welcome. When you go to a cracker's house, you're there. He's just as glad to see you as if you was his favorite cousin. He knows who you are, and he's good. You're welcome. You might sleep on a pallet, and you might eat beans and rice, but you're welcome. You're welcome there. And you can depend on what they say, and they're welcome to your house. You never have to worry about if he owes you, he'll pay you. He won't never hide from you. He might have to pay you 50 cents at a time, but he'll pay you what he owes you. I just, I love cracker people. I love Sandy's my other sister. She's a historian, and she's called me, and we've thought about these people that trying to get them straightened out, and who they are and where they come from. My young'un said, "Don't never ask Grandma her name, because if you do, she goes back 25 generations and tries to put them exactly where they belong." And I said, "That's true. That's the truth." But I'm just a pure cracker, folks. I'll tell you. Dr. Jeremiah says this. He said, be what you says you'll be, and if you don't, you'll be what you think you want, but you ain't. If you don't do what you say, if you don't say who you are, be a person that people respect. I was telling this lady about Jack Smiles. He just took up with us. When he first come here, he was an only child, and he just took up with us. And he loved Mama'd cook all these big platters of venison and great old big things of biscuits, and he'd just eat, and he just loved us. And when he got real old, right before he died, he come out to Indiantown to see me. Right when he married Miriam, that passed away, and he married Miriam. And he come out there to see me, and I said, "Get in this pickup truck. I'm gonna take you where me and you eat dinner 50 years ago." And he got in there, and I took him out there, that same old hammock, me and him had to eat dinner at. Did you?
I've got a question. When did your family arrive in the Indiantown area?
Around 1920. We have the records of. Grandmother was a postmistress in Indiantown in 1925, and I was born in 1929. So, and the 28 hurricane blew her store down. She had a general store. It blew the store down and blew her house down. And she bought a house from the railroad, and they moved it in. We all grew up there in that house and just got along fine, that although it took everything they had, at one time. But they were not the only ones. There was whole families and some of them didn't live. At one time, this lady, I spoke down there in Pahokee or somewhere, and she brought me this letter that somebody had written their father during the 28 hurricane. And I said, Sandy, I'm going to give you this letter because you'll do something with it. And she did. I'll tell you, she said, I forgot what you did down to Sandy.
Jackie's used it, and also it was used in a book by...
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
But
well,
Okay.
but that's a cracker.
All right.
That's a cracker.
You have a question?
Yes. What did you do out in Port Mayaca those years ago? You go there now, it's just a sign. I don't see anything.
Well,
I'm sorry, it just is.
no, that's all right. It is just a sign now, and it kind of breaks my heart every time I go by there. It used to be, if anybody remembers, there was a corner store there called Port Mayaca Store.
Yeah.
And some of you may remember the folks that ran it, Skeet and Noni, and they had it for many, many years. They were my aunt and uncle. And at one time, the Port Mayaca and that store was just a thriving, I won't say metropolis, but it was just a thriving area because it was located on the north-south route of 441 from Okeechobee down to Miami. It was just bustled with activity. All sorts of commercial fishermen would go in there at that time. They used to commercial fish Lake Okeechobee for catfish. There were all sorts of agricultural crews that stopped in there. I worked there as a kid, and it was just a real bustling place. And for being a kid in Port Mayaca, it was great. It's like Carroll was talking about, the outdoors. I moved there when I was 13. And we hunted and we fished and we stayed in the
Did you go to
woods.
school in Indiantown?
No, ma'am, I didn't. I went to school over at Murray.
I drove the bus for 7 years.
Did you?
1950, and I was just wondering if you...
No, I did never go to school in Indiantown. I went to, when we first moved to Port Mayaca, I went to school in Pahokee, and then they changed the rules and you had to go to school within your county, and then I started busing over to Murray 9th the first year that Murray 9th was available. But we would just hunt and fish and just have a great big old time. My cousin and I, Ronnie Sherman, we were about the same age, and we would go down at night on the canal. We'd go to the store, and Aunt Noni would give us a big old bucket of minnows, and we'd get our cane poles, and we'd go sit down all night by the canal, and we'd catch its specks all night long, and we'd be eating sweet rolls and smoking cigarettes when we was 14, and wondered why the next morning our head felt like it was that big. And those are the kind of things that we did just as kids, and we just spent a lot of time in the
And they
woods.
still bite down there.
They still bite down there. The St. Lucie Canal was our playground. Now, I wouldn't even put a toe in it right now, I don't think. But we had a floating dock down there, and when the water went down, there was beach areas, and it was just our playground. And we'd swim all the way across it and go on the other side and go in those woods and come back and just those kind of things. Just being with nature and outside, and it was just a really good time. So I don't know what these Connolly boys did. I'm afraid to ask them.
Do you remember Gerald? Do you remember Gerald Matthew?
Yeah.
Well, I went over to the nursing home to visit Wanda Clements. She was my best friend. And I went over there to visit her, and he was sitting out in the hallway, and he was trying to button his shirt, and I stopped and buttoned his shirt. And he looked at me just as plain as day. He didn't know nothing. And he looked at me just plain as day. He said, "I'll be darned, there's my old bus driver." I hadn't seen him in years. I hadn't seen him in years. He said, "I'll be darned, there's my old bus driver." But we did the same thing in the canal. We swam there. And
Playground.
And see, that drawbridge was in Indiantown. And,
Yeah.
and they had all them what did they put on? Creosote.
Creosote, yeah.
Creosote stuff. And it would eat us up.
yeah.
And Daddy said, so embarrassing. I go by the old bridge and said, there's Iris and about 25 boys swimming.
Yeah.
But, you know, you didn't think about it. You never thought mean thoughts like people do today.
No.
No,
you
not at all.
you never even thought of that. You know, you just
Nope.
times were they were just different. They're very.
They were literally the good old days.
Yeah, they
But
were.
you know, different people have moved to Indiantown through the years. You know the Wrights. You know Mina Wright
Yes.
and well, one time Terry went off. They went off with Terry, and she called me all day long. We had to put her in Chattahoochee, and I said, Mina, they'll come home. They'll come home after a while. I said, when they get through playing, they'll come on home. But she could not understand that. She come from Jacksonville, you know. She couldn't understand just letting a young'un go and play, you know.
Right.
But they did it, you know.
You know, we get a few Yankees come through the museum, and they ask how Indiantown get its name. I don't know.
I do.
Okay.
That's why I'm bringing it up. 'Cause I figured I got an expert
Yes,
here.
I do.
Here you go.
But
Just walk.
they named it, first it was Annie. That was Mr. Platt. He was the first man in 1898 that came there to Indiantown. And he had they named it Annie after his wife. That was his wife's name. But in 1915, Mr. Fountain was the postmaster, and he had it changed. He had the name changed to Indiantown. And listen to this, with all this new junk in Indiantown that I don't even want to talk about. Don't ask me nothing about that, or you'll be sorry. You'll be sorry if you do. But anyhow, what was I telling them, Carol?
About Indiantown, and it was Annie, and then
And Mr. Fountain.
Mr. Fountain.
Named it Indiantown, and so they sent me. They began to send me these letters, and they said I-Town. That's,
Oh, no, I don't like
and
that.
I wrote them a letter, and I said, if you ever send me another piece of mail that's got I on it, I said I'll move my account to Stuart. Now I said, now that's just exactly how bad I feel about it. And believe you me, that was the end of the I-Town. I ain't heard no more about I-Town. But they thought they'd changed it, you know. to our town when it was, and listen to this. Let me tell you another thing.
All right, good.
Betty Mae Jumper. You all know
Oh, yeah.
she was the only one. Well, I lost track of Betty Mae. Her and all of them lived there, but they left in 1927 because they had give the Indians that land down there in Delray, and so they moved down there. And she, Betty Mae, and her mother's name was what?
Something
Ada
Tiger.
Tiger. That's one thing I can't remember his name. But anyhow, I went down there. Johnny rode in something down there in Davie, and so I went up to pay the bill, and Betty Mae was the clerk of the. And when she seen that I was from Indiantown, she went bonkers. And she said, "I'm going to take you over to see my mom." And so we went over there, and Ada was sitting on the front porch making them little Indian dolls, that they made. And, me and Betty Mae really become good friends. She said, "I come to see you." And I say, "When you coming?" "Soon, soon." And if you ask her how long she's going to stay, "Oh, sometime." And one time when they had that come home to Indiantown thing for the library, they let me park my motorhome right up there in the middle of it. And so there she come up there in this old raggedy car. And so me and her went out to the car to get something out of the trunk. And I'm telling you all the truth, that trunk was full of money. I never seen so much money in all my life. And I said, "Betty Mae, my Lord have mercy." I said, "Somebody's going to kill you for this kind of money." And she said, "Huh." They look at that old car and say, "Oh, that old Indian ain't got nothing."
What kind of car was it?
One time she called me at 2:30 in the morning, and if she got really excited, she'd launch into that Seminole, Otherwise, she spoke English, but she would jump into that Seminole. Well, she let out on that Seminole, and I hung it up real quick. I thought it was a drunk Mexican. and so she called 3 times, and finally she said, "Betty Mae, Betty Mae." And I said, "Lord, Betty Mae, what in the world happened?" She said, "My cousin died, Mary Bowers." She knew that Mary Bowers had died. But, I have a real good relationship with the Seminoles because Grandma, they remembered that store way back there when and her mother's gone now, and Betty Mae's gone. Betty Mae's passed away, isn't it? And it just, life goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And here's ours, 75.
95.
My record. I wish it was 75. I wish it was.
Do we have another question from the audience?
I got something I'd like to tell Ms. Wall, though.
Okay, tell me.
I was raised up there, too, in Indiantown, and my daddy owned Indiantown Electric, right?
Yeah.
And Mr. Wall, Homer, was her husband. He acquired the Seminole Inn out there in Indiantown, and my daddy and I were wiring it after I got out of the military. There wasn't no work to be around. It was just one of them times, but we were glad to get that work. And we had finished all the rooms upstairs and had finished the restaurant part of it. We're working downstairs. And he said, "Mike," he said, "would you and your dad like to be my first restaurant customers?" I said, "Sure," because we was hungry, Went on there and we'd sat down and made our order and was eating it. And he'd opened up the doors for the public then. And the first couple that come in, they sat down by the table next to us, right? Just this little old man and his wife. And they hadn't been there too awful long. He wanted to break the ice. And he looked over at me and said, "What do y'all do for fun in a little old town like this?" And I looked over and I said, "Well, sir, I guess that depends on how good you are with a knife and a gun." It ain't any harm, but not to I meant like hunting. And he just probably stopped the conversation.
Anyone else have a question? Jackie?
Did you ever see panthers? Panthers in the old days?
I haven't seen one in Indiantown, but I live down there I moved down to Immokalee, there in the Everglades, Homer cut fence posts for 5 years. And my second baby was born while I was down there. And, one time we was going and we call it dog-legged cabbage tree that grows down like that, instead of growing up like that, it grows down like that. And there he stood, he was a light sorrel color, not red and not brown, just a kind of a real pale, and we've seen several while we were down there, but see, that's down there at Old Choppy, and that's the end of the world. Down there in Honolulu.
I don't know if you know where Dupuy is between Indiantown and Port Mayaca, but my wife and I have seen them out there.
No kidding.
Yeah, that was awesome.
They're protected
Yeah.
now, and they're protected. But,
Coming to the present, what are they doing with the Seminole Inn?
what do I do with it?
What are they doing with it now? It's for sale? It's we miss it.
They're running it. She's given out. She's lost a hip. She had to have a hip replaced. She's the middle daughter, but she's running it.
Okay.
They got a new chef out there, and he's good.
Oh, okay.
Good food.
What was the best thing about growing up in Indiantown or Port Mayaca? What was the very best thing? What do you think?
Well, Hillary Clinton thought she really said something when she said it takes a village to raise a child, but she'd never been to Indiantown, because that's exactly the way they was raised in Indiantown. It didn't matter who you belonged to. If you did wrong, you knew it. You knew it. Your mama knew it before you did. They take care. They raised each other's children. That's the best thing. And like us, we feel like we're kin to Gary and the Connollys, and you don't live and go through life like we have, in the hardships and the ups and the downs and the good times and the bad times, that you don't develop a relationship that can't be broken. It's like that of a family. Sandy Good, she said, "You probably don't remember me, Iris." And I kept looking at her, and she said, "I'm Sandy Good." I said, "Lord, I can see your daddy in you. You look just like your daddy." But I hadn't seen her in a long, long time. And that's the thing that I loved about Indiantown, is that those of us that's from Indiantown, we're not ashamed of it, I guarantee you. We're proud of it.
She's right, we're not ashamed of it. It was, and just the freedom that I had growing up. And I just want to mention about my family. My mother's family came to Indiantown in 1918. So in 2018, I put on a little shindig for our family, cousins, everybody that was related to us, came home, and we did it at our church there, and celebrated our family being in Martin County. It was still Palm Beach County when my mother's family, the priest, when they came in 1918. My mother was born in Fort Lauderdale, and she was 3 years old when they came to Indiantown. My grandfather, I have no idea why they came to Indiantown. He was a deputy sheriff in Broward County, and that's where my mother was born. And then to come to, and I think of them, a horse and wagon is how they came. And the old Jupiter Road, which I would give anything if you could go through what used to be the old Jupiter Road, but I suppose that's all lost to moving forward.
There's so many keys. They fenced it
locks
off,
and fences, and but I remember traveling through that old Jupiter Road. But I think of my grandparents coming to Indiantown on a wagon, right? And of course, the St. Lucie Canal was being dredged at that time. Mama said their first stop was in Port Mayaca. I think she called it SS Ranch. I'm not sure of that name. But then the canal was not dug. She said they actually went around the end of where they were digging to go into what was called Indiantown at that time. My dad came in 1931 from up in the Panhandle. As everybody knows, that area was a very deprived area. My dad said when he came to Indiantown that he was broke, and hungry. He rode with somebody else they drove a Model T. And I think of that trip, on a Model T. He said, but they kept it, the tires patched and they're wired together, and they came they came to work at a sawmill.
Mr. Priest was a Watkins man too.
Yeah, my grandfather sold Watkins
over the back
products.
of that car, and you look at all that stuff. We didn't have the money to buy nothing, but we looked at it.
And but I think of my dad, and of course it was the Depression, and he said he left up there, he had nothing. And he said the man that owned the Model T, they stayed about 2 weeks, and that man said, I'm going back up to Northwest Florida, do you want to go? My daddy said, nope, I left nothing there, I have nothing here, I will stay and take my chances. He said I had 5 cents to my name, and he said he bought a cigar and smoked it.
Didn't waste it.
And I just think of the perseverance and thinking about how I grew up. I know not long ago, when the president from Plains, Georgia, what was his name? Carter. Oh, they kept bringing out about Jimmy Carter, about how he grew up. And I kept listening to all that stuff, and I thought, he might be 100 years old, but he ain't got nothing on me. Talking about he grew up with outdoor plumbing, no running water, no electricity. I thought, so did I.
So did all of us.
So did all of us. We did not get electricity until after the war was over.
1946.
And the war was over.
It come down there on the road that we were on in
Yep.
1946.
So
we had one power plant over there before that. Just for
a lot of people probably don't even know when I talk about this. The house that I grew up in was built out of sawmill slabs. That's the first cut of lumber when a tree it's still got the bark on it. That's the house that I lived in. And of course now we never froze to death, and we didn't, you hadn't even dreamed of telephones and air conditioning, and as I told you, after the war is when, but Jimmy Carter, they kept talking about it. I thought, well, we did too in the rural South. And but
they got the first new truck after the war, after World War II. They got the first truck.
My daddy.
And one of them come in, either mom or daddy, one and said, the sleighs is going to Mayo, Florida. So all of us stood out in the yard, and they drove by, and we waved.
But it was. My daddy got the first truck, like a 2-ton truck, and he built a flatbed body on it, and then we call it a stake body or a cattle body. It was like you'd haul cows in. It was dual purpose.
They didn't have cattle trailers.
They didn't have cattle trailers then, no. But his plan was that we were going to see, he had been for many, many years that he didn't go back to Northwest Florida. Defuniak Springs, Walton County, one of the poorest counties in this state, was where he's from, and it's still a very poor county. But anyway, I've always thought my sisters and my brother, Daddy made the first motorhome because he stretched a tarp across there, and we had we'd never been out of Mark County.
They waved to us. They didn't get under their tarp till after they passed our house.
We put a mattress in the back of that truck, and us 3 girls rode back there, and they had a little old 2-burner oil stove. We stopped beside the road and heated up pork and beans and ate. And 2 days later, we arrived in Defuniak Springs at my grandmother's. She didn't know we were coming, but my goodness, what a time that was. She'd never seen us before. And we made several trips to Defuniak Springs in that motorhome, and I just think about how Daddy, but then he could use it to haul produce on. I remember one time we were coming back from Grandma's in Northwest Florida, and those hard, we call them sand pears that they grow up there, had brought lots of them. They were bringing pears home to everybody. Well, and I think it was Apopka. It had got dark, and the police stopped us. And because he didn't have any tail lights on it. Well, Grandma's cows had chewed the wiring under there and it took all the lights. And we didn't know because it's the first time we was driving at night. And the police officer said, well, what are you hauling in there? He said, well, all I got in there is pears and young'uns, so.
Take your pick.
Yeah, pears and young'uns, so I'm telling you, life, I've had such a special life, so it's great. What do you want to tell Sheldon?
Well, I don't know about all that. So the question was,
What if someone asked you, what was the best thing about living in Indiantown or Port Mayaca? In your words.
yeah, the best thing really was just the freedom of being a country boy, I guess, and living in the country. I mean, we moved, as I mentioned, we moved to Port Mayaca from Vero Beach in the mid-'60s. And in Vero was a bustling town.
Nothing in Vero either.
There wasn't much there, but it was all about like surfing and doing all that kind of stuff. And then when we moved to Port Mayaca and just embracing the country life, I mean, it was just great. You come and go as you please. You didn't have to worry about things. You got to hunt, fish, swim in the canal. The house that we lived in, and like I said, we lived in the same house that the Connollys had lived in, and when we moved into it, it was already probably 30 years old, but it was built, was it older than that? Yeah, probably 40 years old, but it was built up off of the ground, and so there was a big, huge crawl space under there, and of course the dogs would lay up under there, but it had no heat and it had no air conditioning, but it had a great big old ceiling exhaust fan, and you could be in July, in the middle of the summer, crack your windows about like that at night, turn on that exhaust fan, you had to pull a little cover up on it. I mean, it just sucked that air through there and just kept the house cool with no air conditioning. And I would come home on weekends. I'd come home on Friday, and my dad had an old cut-down Willys Jeep, and I maybe bring a buddy with me or something, and we'd just load up that Jeep on Friday and hit the woods and come back in on Sunday, and just stay out in the woods all weekend. And it was just, that kind of stuff was just really great. And I'll always remember that and just be thankful that I had a chance to experience it.
I don't think nobody ever forgets the way they was raised.
Amen.
Things I remember about Indiantown is that everybody seemed to know everybody else. And if you got into trouble, Mom and Dad knew it before you got to the house. And another thing I liked about it was the fact that if somebody was ailing or down on their luck or something like that, we always had a community cookout. We used to have that big park there. They got all them trees planted in there now. But we go out there and have an all-day cookout, and that's where I guess I learned the most about barbecue and Mr. Tommy Clements, and we'd feed everybody, and it didn't cost you anything hardly, and it was just making a donations, and then when whoever was ailing or death in the family, whatever, we gave them a donation. I really liked the people there. I always told myself one of these days I'd probably go back. I got to go back to see him now. So.
I live in the same house I've lived in for 50 years.
Oh my.
Over 50 years.
So do I.
Oh, I want to go back to Port Mayaca.
That's true.
That old store that Sheldon was talking about, my daddy and Mr. Pee Wee Smith drove pilings underneath that store, and the company he worked for, Bessemer Properties, built that store there. It was originally a packing house on the corner where we called school bus forever, and in the middle was a little grocery store, and my dad run that filling station on the side of it there that sold gas. And that's what it was when it first started. And we called the bus there forever, seemed like. And we just had some good times in Port Mayaca. Gary and James run a hog down one day. They must have run 100 miles, but they finally caught him. And I remember that. People around here don't experience them sand spurs and stuff like that when you walk outside. There's parts of the yard didn't go in. And then my daddy got this urge one time for us to cut the grass. Well, y'all don't understand, our house in Port Mayaca was a 10-acre lot. And there was a house in the middle of it, and the rest of it was yard and palm trees. So he planted a little 20-inch push blower, and we used to get out there Saturday, Sunday, part of Monday, mowing that grass. You know, all he did was supply the gas. Never seen him pushing it. It was, oh, you boys need to mow the grass. So yeah, we had good times, didn't we, Larry?
Yeah. What I loved about Port Mayaca, and ours was talking about a village. Well, my mom and dad had 6 boys, so we were a village in our house. But we got along. We never had too much tussling. And like I say, across the, I don't know if any of you know where the cemetery is out there, but Lord, we used to run them woods out there and stay out there from morning till you had to be in before it got dark. Y'all remember those times? But yeah, we had a good time.
I had a good relationship with the Connollys, always.
I remember that
Yeah.
bus used to stop there and drop off Philip.
She don't know how much we love her and
Junior.
appreciate her. She is one of the finest persons I've ever met.
Every now and then they all come home, those of them that's left. They always come over there to church, and I love to see them every time they come.
Does anybody remember the lumber cutting,
Huh?
the lumber
The
cutting?
lumber cutting, did you all remember?
Well,
Sawmills.
see, we
There was
didn't
a big-
ever cut lumber to sell, not that kind of lumber. He cut fence posts. You know, used to, before we changed, before 1945, I think, they, if you hit a cow, if you hit my cow, you had to pay me for it. But they passed a law, the railroad got a law passed that said if you hit my cow, I got to pay you, I got to buy you a new car.
Wow.
And so you see, everybody had to fence their land
Fence, and you
then.
got-
We'd go in the pasture there in Indiantown and go all the way to, we'd go all the way to Gladys Savage's in
Use that
Palm
mic,
City.
please. So, that's a good story.
What's the story? Oh, yeah, the fence posts.
And I'm sure they were all lighter.
Well, or cypress.
Oh, okay,
Either one.
okay.
Either one, and it was 8 foot long, and so we camped down there. And Homer went down there first with Daddy, and and I come over here to Stuart, and it seemed like the old boy's name was Johnny Mann.
Oh, yeah.
Can you
He was the
remember?
fire chief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he had a little old trailer that he wanted to sell for $250, and I bought it.
Oh,
And when Homer come home from Immokalee, I was packed up, had a baby 3 months old. Terry was 3 months old. And I moved down there with that truckload of black people that Daddy would pick them up in Indiantown and take them down there, and they'd stay till Friday night, and then they'd bring them back, you know, for the weekend and go again. And, you know, Mr. Hudson used to come and hunt with us, you know, and we were in a doggone reservation. I don't know how we got by with it.
No, Mr.
I'm
Hudson's from the
sure,
bank.
I'm sure it was against the law, but I don't know what happened. But anyhow, he had always come down there to Immokalee, but he didn't want to get caught. So he would, we would haul the stuff out that he killed. If he killed 2 deer, me and Homer would haul them out for him. And he said to him, he said, "Listen, big boy," he said, "you ain't never gonna make no money, cowboy." He said, "That don't pay nothing." He said, "When you find out what you want to do with your life," he said, "you come see Mr. Hudson." He said, "I'm the money man." And sure enough, when we decided to go into the lumber business, and Homer went to every old man in Indiantown and asked them, "Do you think it'll go, you know?" "Oh, no, Homer, don't." Because Homer had a good job. He had gone to work for Air Products and Chemicals. And he learned he memorized the diagram of a diesel engine. And they made that fuel that those missiles run with those diesel engines. And he just went like that till he got to be, he made some money, and they said, oh, don't quit your good job, don't do that. But we did, went in the lumber business, and it's been good to us. And but I'm still the same old Iris. My kids say to me, Mama's got that depression mentality. And so I probably do. If I think it costs too much, I wouldn't buy it for no matter how bad I wanted it. But that's just my nature. That's that. But I was raised just like
remember
this.
a sawmill, a big sawmill that was there?
Well, we had Davis's sawmill. We had Sherman right over there on the way to Okeechobee. There was 3 or 4 right
There was
around
Davis
here.
and Jenkins sawmill, Irish.
Yep, there was
Davis and Jenkins was a big
But
sawmill.
wasn't there a small sawmill on that road that went in back of that
West Farm?
Indiantown printing?
My daddy that was my daddy's
Okay,
sawmill.
because I remember that.
My
I
dad
do.
had,
Okay.
now his was never
Slaves,
aged.
yeah.
Slaves.
Yeah.
My dad had a sawmill.
Okay.
Right. Now, he didn't saw the lumber where our first house came from, of course, but
Oh, yeah,
later on
yeah,
in years.
Right.
But I have a story I want to tell y'all about.
Okay.
We all remember World War II. I was 3 years old when Pearl Harbor was bombed, and I've learned that its trauma is usually our earliest memories. Well, I remember all about Pearl Harbor and just everybody crying, and Pearl Harbor had been bombed, and here we were in this war now, and we all know about Jonathan Dickinson Park. During the war, I am going to say, let's see now, Pearl Harbor was bombed in 41, probably in 44, from Jonathan Dickinson. Camp Murphy was established there. They had a training camp that was out Farm Road where we lived, Irish.
Yeah, I know.
They came in there one day, all these big army trucks with, I don't care if there's Army, Navy, what, they was just soldiers to me. I was a kid, 3 years old, and they rolled in there. It was literally in our front door where they set up a training camp from Camp Murphy. They began to put up these lines. We thought they were electric lines, but it was early radar training. We finally learned is what it was. But they worked 24 hours a day setting that up. They had all their sleeping facilities, camping, they hauled their own water in there. And my dad was never in the military, but he cut cross ties for a living at that time, and he had several men that worked with him cutting cross ties, and that's why he never served in the military, was because cross ties was essential to our national defense. But we had, and they would, one crew would be there, and they would set up that big line about 3 miles long, make communication, another group would come in and they would take it down.
And some of them were prisoners. But they looked just like the American.
But and I'm telling you, and many people never realized that. But Myrtle knows that we were there. And we had to have those green. We could have no light from our house.
Was that where that big old sawdust pile was?
Yes. Yep. And and I remember that. I've talked to a lot of people during my life, and I'll soon be 87, so I feel very blessed that I've reached this stage in life and still able to go. But a lot of these memories, and I know I went and talked to a man in Jupiter that does a lot of history, and Josh Liller, that's his name, about this training camp. And I've been to Camp Murphy to try to verify that, but I can find no records of it. But I can tell you, I was there, I saw it, it happened. And
they'd come by the house, they'd come right by.
Anything that those military people needed, if we had it, they could have it. Whether it be water, well, in fact, my dad had made sugarcane syrup, and we had this big 55-gallon kettle that he cooked sugarcane to make syrup in. they used that to hold water in, and we had a gasoline pump. They could start that and pump water when their water truck didn't get there. Anything we had, they had access to.
Yeah.
And as I'm telling you, we could have no light at night from our house. It just, we couldn't have it. So we had to eat supper at 4:30, so we could all be gone to bed and no lights could be seen.
All we had was kerosene lamps anyhow.
That's right, all we had was a kerosene lamp anyway.
Can't see nothing by them anyhow.
Right, yes. But that has stuck with me my entire life.
And I didn't know that. I wondered where in the heck they was going. I can remember them going by the house and they them boys was blonde headed, you know, they looked just like our boys. Somebody said they're prisoners, but I didn't know that they went by
They
there.
were, but I've been over there to where Camp Murphy was, and nobody can tell me a thing about it.
I was so thankful.
But almost everyone is gone that,
From that day, yeah.
that's about it. Alice would have known it,
Yeah,
but everybody's gone.
I know, I know.
Does anyone else have any questions? Yes.
Carroll, tell them about the trip that Daddy taken us to the ocean to see the.
To the ocean to see,
Yes.
of course, we were poorer than the church mice, and you know, gas was rationed. Times were hard during that time, and we never went anywhere. And you asked about going to Stuart one time. I come to Stuart every day now if I want to. But back then, maybe it was every 2 weeks we'd get to go to the Piggly Wiggly or something, or either we had a little old grocery store in Indiantown, but that was that. And Merle wanted me to talk about a ship that was, I guess a torpedo had hit it. It was off of Hope Sound Beach. How in the world we heard about it, I don't know. But Sunday afternoon, Daddy drove us over there, and that ship, I remember seeing it. It was, I call it lopped over on its side, smoke coming from it. And so World War II was very, very real to me, because we always wanted to know what was happening. And I think of today, we know about the war in Ukraine. Now we see it in real time, and I think about that, you know, things that happened a month before you know about it.
That's right.
In those days.
My uncles were in the
Any
war.
other questions?
Way back then, weren't you like afraid of gators and snakes and mosquitoes? What was that like?
Bad.
We were too ignorant.
Bad, I'll tell you.
They didn't seem to, I don't know, they seem like they're more afraid of you than they are today. They're daring today, it seems like. Because of people feeding them, I believe.
Yeah, it just, gators and snakes just wasn't an issue, really. I mean, it wasn't anything that we were afraid of or thought about. I mean, you see a snake, you scoot him out of the way. A gator, just let him go and do his thing. Now, the mosquitoes was a different story, though. Yeah, Port Mayaca got some mosquitoes, I'm telling you that.
Carry on.
I killed it.
Big mosquitoes.
If I can find anything.
And my nephew got after me recently.
Okay, if we have no more questions, I want to thank each and every one of you
Well, thank you for letting
for
me speak.
reminiscing. Wonderful.